My name's Paul Huggins. I'm 60, for goodness sakes. I mean, you can't grow grass on a busy street. Look, and I come from Hastings, and I've led a very colourful life, lots of very good experiences, near-death experiences, and then fame, downfall, transformation, and then I'm now running a youth club and getting kids off the streets and trying to direct them away from what I used to do years ago. I was a bit of a tear away from day one, apparently, screaming and shouting and wanting my own way. When we got to 5 years old, I got to 5 years old and I started getting a taste for alcohol. By the time I got to 9, you know, the police had taken me home a couple of times, and mainly for going in barns on farms with my friends and wrecking everything. And I'd done a bit of shoplifting as well, and couldn't keep my hands to myself. Then my mate, little David, met up and he said, "Would you like to come up to boxing, Paul?" And I remember putting an old smelly pair of gloves on because it looked like the place was a bomb in the war and there was paint peeling off the wall. And I started boxing this bag and I started moving around and lefting and righting, throwing nice little combinations. And all of a sudden I looked out the corner of my eye and the trainers were staring at me and people were staring at me. The bell went and I went like, for the minute rest, and they come up to me and they said, "Where have you been boxing before then, Paul?" I said, "Well, I haven't done any boxing, sir." I said, "I've just been watching Muhammad Ali and Henry Cooper." They said, "Well," they said, "you're a natural. You come up next week," they said, we want to see you more often." So I went home and told my mum the good news, and it became a family of mine. The boxing club, Hastings West Hill, was my second family, and I went every week without fail. And by the time I was 14, I was a British champion.
Come on then, how good did you get?
Well, I could have got better, but I was, as I say, I was a naughty boy. Anyway, I won the British Schoolboy Championships, which is of Great Britain, against a Welsh boy called Calvin Smart, who went on to win the Lonsdale belt. And then I turned professional at 18 years old after doing a spell in Borstal for stealing cars and that. Boxing sort of changed my life a bit. I got to #1 in the UK and 10th in the world, and I fought the world champion. That's my claim to fame. I beat the man that beat the world champion, went over to Italy and fought a guy called Vinto Limitola, the Italian and European champion, knocked him out in the first round. Fought John Feeney, the Lonsdale belt holder. He was a British champion. I beat him. And so I weren't too bad, you know. But the hardest fight I had was with myself. I've had quite a few low points, you know. We went up to London to Kiss FM. Nigel Benn was there, he was the DJ, and a couple of other fighters, and we had quite an interesting time. And on the way home, we come out of London and we got to Roberts Bridge on the way down, and all of a sudden, I fell asleep at the wheel. Probably going quite a rapid speed, probably even 70 miles an hour, and it's a wobbly bend. I fell asleep. This is an interesting encounter. All of a sudden it was like a loud voice saying, "Wake up, Paul, you're about to crash." And I woke up and I was about to crash, and then we did start crashing. And then we started tumbling over and rolling, and the wheel flew off, and the old glass come through the windscreen, and it was like a loud voice or something in my ear, "Let go now." And I let go of the wheel, and I come out of the window, and I was like, it was like as I was sat on a grass verge. And this lorry driver stopped, and my mate was like ever so injured, and I said, "You better call him an ambulance." I got sort of like in the morning, the police said, "How'd you get out of that?" I told them, I thought, I don't know, it might have been God, I said, because I heard this voice telling me how to get out and how to hold on and how to let go and when it was the time. And they said, "We thought you was mad, Paul, but now we know you are." So that was like a bit, and then I went into another spell of drug taking and alcohol abuse, and I went right down the pan. You know, I was at my depth's end. And it all started from there, being down and out, really.
Tell us your story about being in court.
I was in a pub, in a little pub in Hastings called the Beer Engine, The police come into the pub, they come up to me, and next one each side, and in plain clothes, and they said, Paul, we want to talk to you up the police station. So we sat there and I asked a few questions and I gave them the best information as I could, and then he drove me back down to the pub. 2 weeks later there was a crash through the door, armed police, they come steaming in, a friend of mine when he was here alive, and they said, we're arresting you on suspicion of murder. So then they went round to my house to search it, and they found a double-barrel shorn-off shotgun, loaded. So that was that. And then I was up in Lewis Crown Court. I got my old silk suit on and my old fob watch and all that, and I put my shades, my Ray-Bans on, you know, and I looked $1 million, because I thought I'm not going to come back here for a while, so I better look as best I can. Just before I went up to see the judge, Judge Brown it was, Send 'em down Brown. It was all over the cells down in the holding cell. Send 'em down Brown gave me 15, 25, 10. I thought, and my barrister, he said, Judge Brown don't like guns, he said, and I reckon you're going to get between 4 and 7 years. And I got on my hands and knees and I was in the cell on my own. I started praying to a God I didn't know. Oh, please, Lord, you know I'm not that bad. You know I do things for charity. Oh, 7 years. I said, I can't do it. I want you to help me out. And I will. I'll get to know you more, really. If you're real, sort this out for me. This judge don't like it. And after all this anguish and that, and I got in front of the judge and he said, stand up, Huggins. I stood up. This is his exact words. I don't know what it is, but something's telling me something about you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 9 months. I couldn't believe it. I went, God bless you, Your Honour, like that, with the old V sign. I looked round at all the police sitting there like that, all thinking that we've got him for 3 years, and they was gutted. So there I was, got locked up in Lewis. They said, what are you in for? The normal things. Firearms and sawn off shotgun. And so how much do you get? 4 or 5? I said, no, 9 months. They said, you're a grass. I said, no. I said, I think I met Jesus or somebody. I was praying in the cell to this God or Jesus. I said, and that happened. I said, I've got to look into this, you know. I think you better look into it as well, because he seems like a bit of a miracle worker to me. So I got a nice little Good News Bible off the chaplain, and I started reading through it, and I got to the book of John, and I sort of started reading, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you've got to be born again, you know. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And I said, okay, who are you then? I said, let me know who you are. Are you Jesus? Are you God or what? Because I don't know what I'm doing here, God, but I've had so many near-death experiences, and look, you've got me in here and I ain't got a long sentence, please let me know who you are. There's a guy doing 11 years down underneath me for pulling a gun on a police officer in a drug raid, and so the Holy Spirit come into the cell. It filled me up, and I started crying like a baby. And my cellmate said, what's happened to you? What are you crying for? I said, I just met Jesus. He said, have a word. He said, what you been taking? I said, honestly, I just met Jesus. And I'm fantastic. I said, I'm a changed man. And that changed my life. I come out of jail and I wanted to find a church. And I did. I had a little Morris A35, a lovely little old car, and I thought, well, I'll go down the pub today, but God had other plans. He said, no, you're not going down the pub today. He said, you're going up King's Church on the Ridge. And I said, well, I'm going down the pub. And I started driving down the pub, and I couldn't get down the pub. It was like, and I kept driving, I thought, and there I was in King's Church car park, and I walked in there, and it was like a lovely reception, and I said, and then it was like, go up to the stage and tell them what you're here for. And I went on and grabbed the microphone, never been in there before, told my story a little bit, you know, and telling them what God just led me in here. I don't believe it, but it's fantastic, nice to see you all. It looks like this is my new family, sort of thing. And that was where it started. Amazing, wasn't it?
Amazing.
I've had my struggles, that's why the book's called Knocking Out My Demons. You know, I'm still knocking them out, as we all are, as now I know who the enemy is. I've realised that if you're going through a long dark tunnel, stay on the train, because at the end of the day you're going to get to that station and his name is Jesus. But whoever believes in him, no works, no nothing, and accepts his gift of salvation, he'll take anybody on board and he'll save us. And having Jesus in control of your life is the best thing that a man and a woman could ever do. That's what I think.